And now, my friends, we've arrived at my James Bond. Yep, I continue working my way through a selective viewing of the James Bond oeuvre. And it's time for a Pierce Brosnan. Now, out of this commission set, the one that was opted for was The World Is Not Enough. Now, as implied by my opener, Pierce Brosnan was basically my first Bond. I was aware of James Bond as a thing before seeing GoldenEye, but I never had seen any of the movies, and I certainly didn't really care. Then I saw GoldenEye, and I liked GoldenEye a lot. And then I started caring. Obviously, as has been noted, since some of the things I've watched in this viewing were things I'd seen before and some weren't, I didn't go back and suddenly binge all of James Bond. But I have a real soft spot for Brosnan. I have a soft spot for his movies. I know some folks don't. Some people really don't like some of them, and some people have a lot of issues with this one in particular. I've always actually been a bit of a defender of this one. And so it was interesting going back and doing the thing that I tend to do when I do a revisit on something for the purposes of a review. If it's something I already like, I start looking for more of the flaws or the things that I overlook, forgave, or forgot about. Or if it's something that I didn't like as much, I try and find the good stuff in it. But because this is a movie I like, but have not seen in a long time, yeah, I see some of the complaints. But I will say this, the stuff that I remember being good, it was still really good. But you know what? Normally, I'll start with the good stuff and then get to my complaints. We're going to flip the script this time. I'm going to acknowledge the things that aren't great about this movie. Let's start with the broad overarching problem that honestly kind of seeps into most of the edges, which is that the movie's too long. Now, a bit over 2 hours is not atypical for a Bond movie, but the thing is, nothing about this plot needs that. And honestly, the way in which it's too long is every single action scene goes on longer than it should. Like right from the beginning with the boat chase as part of the cold open, I'm watching it. I'm like, this is a really rad boat chase. And then it just keeps going. And it hits the point where I'm like, oh, this is where it's going to wrap up. No, it just keeps going. It just keeps going. And like, there's no weak beat in it, but it's just taking too long. It just goes on. It keeps happening in nearly all the action scenes. It hits a point where I'm like, that'll be the end point of the natural conclusion. But it's like, no, we're going to keep going. Huh? It's like really good examples are like the boat chase. We get a point where like, oh, well, cool, she got away. No, he's going to go around another way. Now he's going to drive the boat up onto the street. We're going to have an extended thing of that, which is going to go on longer than it should in and of itself before we rejoin the boat chase and get right back into that again. Or with the ski chase, which Bond historically has done ski chases quite well. And this one is also pretty good. But we hit a point where it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a good end point. Where like this, I forget what they call them, but it's basically a snowmobile with a parachute, kind of thing. It gets knocked off a cliff and it's going down. It's like, oh, well, that's the end of this action beat. But then it deploys a parachute and it comes back around. It's like, oh no, we're gonna keep going, okay. And that kind of thing happens with nearly every action scene. And honestly, if you shave about 20% out of every action scene in this, you'd probably save a good solid 10 minutes out of the movie and the whole thing would flow a heck of a lot better. That's really, for me, the big problem with this movie. It has action bloat, which is an odd kind of bloat to have. I can't think of too many times off the top of my head where action scenes that go on too long, like that are good and go on too long. Usually if an action scene goes on too long, it's because it's not a good action scene, you just want it to be over. These are good action scenes, but they still outstay their welcome. All right, let's take a minute and talk about Denise Richards as Christmas Jones, because probably the most maligned aspect of this movie, Everyone made fun of it at the time. Everyone still makes fun of it. And look, I'm not going to say she's good in the part, because she's not. But only so much of that is her fault. The character's not very well written. The character's basically an exposition dump to either receive exposition from Bond or to deliver exposition to Bond, depending on who knows the thing that needs to be communicated to the audience. If it's spy stuff, Bond's telling it to her. If it's nuclear bomb stuff, she's telling it to Bond. So that's all the character is. And there's nothing wrong with the character having utility, but that's all she's written to be. Whatever personality she was going to have, aside from delivering exposition, was going to be brought by the performer. And Denise Richards didn't bring much. And her line readings are very flat. And that's one thing I'll point out. People are like, a nuclear physicist, really her? She doesn't come across as stupid. I don't buy that she's too stupid, but the line readings are just flat and uninteresting, which is still a problem. And the other thing that I will point out, kind of in her defense, while she's not good, she is far from an outlier in the Bond franchise. I do not see how anyone could look at her and say that she's the worst without at least giving equal consideration to Dr. Holly Goodhead from Moonraker, at minimum. So, there's a long line of kind of terrible, bland Bond girls. She's one of many. Does that make it good? No. But it means it's not worth harping on, after I've now harped on it a bit. All right, so those are kind of the main things that are legitimate issues, I feel. Stuff that's a little bit middling. It's not bad, but it could have been better. Robert Carlyle is a bit underused. He doesn't seem to have decided what accent he's using, but whatever. That's not atypical for a Bond film. What's more of an annoyance with him is the whole gimmick of his character not feeling pain because of the bullet in his head. First of all, great gimmick. I love it. But it never really comes into play all that much. A couple of points he gets shot and doesn't slow down, but even in those instances, it doesn't really matter. And functionally, the story would have been exactly the same if he just hadn't been hit with a bullet. Nothing is different about that interaction. So, honestly, Bond's shoulder injury has more impact on the story than the fact that Renard can't feel pain. So, something was off about that. Also kind of in the mixed bag category, John Cleese as R, the future Q. It's actually a good choice. I think he works well in that part, but the character is played straight up for laughs. Not just laughs, but laughs at his expense. I think more than was actually worth doing. I like that they brought Zukovsky back as a character, returning from GoldenEye. I don't like that they kill him. But having now said that stuff, what's good about this? Well, for starters, the song rules. Garbage Singing The World Is Not Enough is awesome. It is easily, for me, a top 3 best Bond theme kind of rendition. I love it. I've performed burlesque to that song. I love the hell out of it. So that, right off, kicks things off in a very good way. But let's talk about Brosnan. I think Brosnan does a phenomenal job balancing the charm, the witticisms, the sense of fun, and the cold-blooded killer that Bond is, because that's his job. So here's the read I always had on Brosnan, and it's always interesting watching him because I don't feel like this is headcanon. I feel like his performance supports this idea that he is very good at his job, and his job ultimately is killing people. At the end of the day, Bond, we can call him a spy. He's an assassin. He is sent in to kill people or find people and kill people or find out what people are up to and kill them if necessary. That's what he does. And when he has to do that work, Brosnan goes stone cold in the face. Even in just the fights. It's not like Roger Moore. The fights aren't fun. Once the fight is over, okay, he'll quip. But in the moment, all business. And so when he has his more fun-loving moments, and he has his quips and his smarm, honestly, for lack of a better way to put it. When he has that, for me, how that reads, and his performance backs up this interpretation, is that he's going to have fun as his job allows him to, but as soon as the job rears its head and he has to knuckle down, this is not time for fun, we get serious. And his moments of seducing, a potential informant, or gambling and playing with someone to try and get information or what have you, to me read as, this is where I find my fun in this line of work, so let's have fun. And I really like that as a take on Bond. And I think he's great. I think he's great in this movie. I think he's great overall. So, I love Brosnan in this. But let's talk about my other favorite thing in this movie. Sophie Marceau as Elektra King. I love Elektra King as a villain. I love that the reveal of her comes fairly late. It's not a huge shock. I mean, character's name's Elektra. Turns out she had a weird twisted relationship, or not relationship, but like notions around her father. All this thing seems to be about her father was killed, and she's concerned about it. Like, no, she hated him. She hated him, and has her own agenda going on. And it's not that hard to track ahead of time, but what I like about it is she does a good enough job playing the needs protection. She doesn't really play damsel in distress. She actually plays someone who knows that the world is dangerous, but she's going to do what she thinks is best, and she is going to have her fun even if it is dangerous. And Bond is trying to protect her, and that gets Bond invested in her. So when she turns on him, and when she kidnaps M, and when she is getting ready to kill Bond, the dynamic between them, she gets under his skin. Because this isn't just a villain, someone with a plan that he's in the way. He cared. Was he in love with her? No, but he cared about her. He was dedicated to protecting her, make sure that she was okay. He felt a debt to her because he had failed to save her father, and he had thought that her father mattered to her, but he didn't. And for him to realize how much he's been played and how twisted all of this has been, and how much she has just manipulated every inch of this entire affair, including him, it gets under his skin. And you see it in his performance, and her performance definitely earns that reaction from him. I love that. And I actually think they did a surprisingly good job, considering that it could have just been a Stockholm Syndrome character, but it's not. We find out enough about her and how she operates to realize that's not what's going on. She is legitimately well fleshed out, and the performance from Sophie Marceau does a lot to sell this character and make her work. And it sounds weird. It sounds weird for me to say that the movie earns James Bond straight up shooting her in the head when she is unarmed and is not attacking him. But it does. And it's a brutal moment because she brought out the brutal man. And this is his job. So that all works really, really well for me. Unfortunately, the movie does drag a bit after she dies for the reasons I've already mentioned. All the action scenes drag, and of course we have an action climax. I mean, there's probably one or two too many action scenes anyways, but even if you kept all the ones that are in there, if you shorten them up, this thing would be a heck of a lot tighter and would flow a lot better. So, I acknowledge the issues with this. I get that it's not everybody's favorite, but I still like it. And the things that I remember liking about it are still good. Brosnan's still good. Marceau is still good. The music, not just the theme rules, but the music track in general is really good. Like, I mean, granted, I'm kind of nostalgic. It's kind of a technoed up kind of take on Bond music, but I like it. I dig it. And most of the other features function well enough. Robert Carlyle does well enough. Bringing back Zukovsky works well enough. Oh, Q. Let's take a second on Q. It was really well done the way they set up his being able to leave, and what Desmond Llewellyn brought to the part, this sense of, I love this work, but I got to get ready to go. And they gave him the best leaving line. Always have an escape plan. That was terrific. There's quite a few good lines in this. There's no point in living if you can't feel alive. That's a good line. I love that the world is not enough gets acknowledged as being Bond's freaking family motto, which goes back to blasted flippin' Honor Majesty's Secret Service. I do like this one. It's too long. It drags at some points, but I still like it. What do you think about The World Is Not Enough? Woo, knocking my thing around. Whoops. Whatever you think about it, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. I got a Patreon. That's how you can commission me to view things as well, if you feel up to it. But no pressure on that. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break.
This video wouldn't have been possible without the support of my patrons, and I want to give special thanks to Jared Boyce, MJ, The Doctor, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Caitlin Schwartz, Edelon, Robin Moore, Ross Schultz, and Shayla Gorley. Thanks so much.